Good afternoon, NorCal Carters. And today we have Farshad Bagheri. Did I say your last name right?
You did?
All right. And Farshad is the TB cart importer for the USA and has been a longtime supporter of the NorCal Carters project. And today, Farshad is joining us to talk about his trade in program. So, how about you introduce yourself?
All right. Hello, everyone. First of all, thank you for having me, Jason. My name is Farshad Bagheri. I'm the importer of TB Kart to the United States and have been for the past about 6 years now. TB Kart is manufactured in northern Italy in an area about 80 kilometers north of Milan by the Swiss border. That area is also home to several other karting manufacturers. And if you were to look pretty hard and look at statistics, about 85 to 90% of the world's karts are produced in Italy, and the great majority of those in the neighborhood where our factory is. So again, my name is Farshad, and it's a pleasure to finally be here with you and talk to you about our great program.
Yeah, so I saw this thing floating around on social media, mainly on Facebook, is my social media entertainment, I guess. And today you had some pictures of even yard carts. You had some vintage carts. You had a bunch of carts that you were posting pictures of, and it basically said, "Here's an example of what you can trade in." So why don't you go into some details with us on this trade-in program?
Well, the genesis of the training program itself has been really a pet project of mine. My goal is to have the largest grid possible at every level of competition. That is local level, state, regional, and national levels. To do that, we need to make it more affordable and more feasible for more people to be able to get into the sport. Right now, there is a good portion of the population, the racing population, that is on outdated chassis that may or may not be adequate to compete at even a local level. So we want to make it as easy as possible for those people to upgrade to something that is ready to go for today's competition. And in order to do that, I wanted to make sure that they found some value in whatever it is that they are driving right now. A lot of times it's difficult for people to pull the trigger, so to speak, on a new purchase, especially a larger purchase. I certainly appreciate that people work hard for their money and they have they control where they spend their disposable income and their, so to speak, fun money. So I want to be a partner in their effort to get to the grid with a competitive package. To do that, we came up with our trade-in program that is designed to give them some value for what they have existing and make it very easy, financially easier for them to get into a much more stout package and an up-to-date racing package.
Perfect. Yeah, and I don't think a lot of people really understand when they go to Craigslist or some of these other online marketplaces, and I actually do a lot of buying and selling from those marketplaces for older carts. I don't think people realize that if you get an older cart, the technology in karting can change fairly quickly. So now you have a cart you pick up for $500 on Craigslist. You call every cart shop in your region. They're not going to help you because they don't have the stuff on the shelf. You find someone like myself that will actually do it on the side, but I'm going to charge for my time to search all these parts out. And many times I just politely tell the person, like, look, my time that I'm going to charge you for to find these random parts, it's going to cost more than the cart itself. And a trade-in program like this is fantastic because we might have some of those people sitting there going, well, I paid $500 for the cart. I already have $400 into it in parts. It's still really not track worthy. Now we're not far away from getting them in a TB cart. Because you have right here, I'm reading $1,000 credit for kid cart, cadet cart, or a yard cart. So explain that ratio real quick. How is that $1,000 credit applied, and what is it deducted from what amount?
Okay. It is really a function of the MSRP of our chassis. So basically, we wanted to have a pool of money that we would make available to people. And it is based on each category of chassis that we have to offer. The cadet cart and kid cart fall in a certain category. Then the next step up from that would be the tag chassis. And the final step would be the shifter chassis. As the chassis components and generally their design gets more complicated and you go from, let's say, a cadet all the way to shifter, then the costs also go up with that. With a shifter chassis, you have front brakes, rear brakes. Your systems are a lot more stout to be able to deal with the added power and the torques that it has to deal with and the G-forces that are, again, amplified because of the extra power the motors produce. So our systems have to be a lot more stout, and that comes at a cost. So that naturally those chassis are more expensive. So if you have a shifter cart that's laying around, we give you $2,000 worth of credit to be used towards another shifter cart. So basically the credit is given to you based on the chassis that you are choosing. So if you bring a yard cart in and say, hey, I really want to go up to a tag chassis, instead of giving you the $1,000, I'm sure we can give you the $1,500 just to get you in a tag chassis that you wanted to. So again, if you read the press release itself, Mike Morini and I had a fun time writing the press release because he's asking all these questions. He's like, well, what do you want to do? What kind of limitations do you want to have? And he's asking very good business-minded questions. And I'm like, dude, I really don't care. I just want people to get into our carts and make it as easy as possible for them. So instead of coming up with rules and regulations, and here you have to jump through these hoops to qualify for that kind of money, I honestly don't even care if these chassis will ever run. I mean, they could be bent in half and you bring it in, and I will give you the same amount of money as credit towards the new chassis.
So it's really a pretty straightforward, not a lot of fine print program.
Zero fine print.
Zero fine print. Huh. I think I'm going to go on Craigslist and buy a bunch of carts and trade them in.
Fine. Fine. I really don't care. As long as you're in a TV cart, you enjoy yourself the weekends that you have to go out, then it's a win-win for everybody. Right now, it's a difficult time for everyone. And again, I understand that most of us work hard for our money, and we choose where we are going to spend our discretionary income. If we are lucky enough to earn people's business to come to TV Cart and trust us with their hard-earned cash to get a value for that cash, the least I can do is to make things as easy as possible, give them the support that they need to have a great weekend.
Yeah, and isn't that the truth? It's a lot of times we find ourselves stumbling, trying to get people into the sport. And I definitely myself would be one of those people that would make it very complicated. Oh, you have to post on social media. You have to do this. You have to do that to be eligible. And then people start reading. It's like, man, I don't have time for all of that. And, you know, it may be inherently by making it so simple, people are going to start sharing this with their friends. They're actually going to go to the track and take pictures because isn't social media about the fake life we live?
Hey, we're all Michael Schumachers when the fighters go down, I'm sure.
That's right. That's exactly it. Yeah. So when I saw this, I know you were doing a sale last month with your product line. And then when I saw the trade-in, it's like, okay, this is going to be interesting to track. Let's see how this goes. And when I saw the press release, like, there's not enough words in this thing.
Good. That's my design.
Now, who... Obviously, we're NorCal Carters. So are people in California eligible for this program?
Absolutely. Anyone in the United States.
Anybody in the United States is eligible for this program. Now let's say...
the challenge there becomes getting the chassis to us. So I'm sure we can come up with creative ways to minimize the cost of shipping. We're not giving people a huge discount so they can spend money on UPS or FedEx or whatever shipping method that they use. That's just putting good money where it doesn't belong. So maybe we can come up with some kind of a creative thing on a case-by-case basis to see how we can get the chassis from them, give them the appropriate credits, and get them into the right chassis for their trade-in.
Yeah, absolutely. And maybe it's something as simple as they have to deliver their chassis to one of your dealers, one of your stocking dealers or something.
Sure.
Yeah, so I can. So it's available to anyone in the U.S. Fantastic.
In the U.S.
All right. So have you had any interesting trade-in requests yet?
Yeah, we've had a couple of good ones that I would say you would probably be well served to be up on your tetanus shot before you got into the cart.
So I must have sold it on the side. But you know what? It's again, is putting people in newer technology. They can get on the track. If you're listening to this and you're kind of wondering, oh, well, what's newer technology? Let's just make it real simple for you. A lot of the tracks I know of in Northern California, if you don't have a current fairing, if you don't have a current nose cone, if you don't have a current rear plastic bumper that extends beyond the rear tires, those tracks will not even let you on the track just to go play because their insurance won't cover you. So again, when you see these carts all over the place for $500 and they have no Nerf bars or no rear bumper, it could easily be $300 to $500 to upgrade that cart with just body work. And it's still an old chassis. So give that some thought. Again, this is really, I'm targeting that statement to the people that just don't know. And this is a great way. Go ahead.
In addition to that, the geometry of the chassis themselves have changed quite a bit. I know that TB Kart Factory is a phenomenal partner to TB Kart USA. So we do a lot of co-development on our chassis to chase the last 2 or 3 tenths of a second. Those are the tenths of the seconds that separate national champions from second place and beyond. So when we are doing that, all of the effort, all of the engineering that goes into gaining that kind of minuscule amount of time trickles down to our chassis being very easy to drive and very competitive out of the box for the local series and for the average user that is not chasing national championship points. So TB Factory has been tremendous in working with us to develop things that make sense in the United States market. Since most of the great majority of carts are designed in Europe, they're really designed for European tracks, which are characteristically different than American tracks. Now, from your work with SweetTech that, it's night and day difference when you go to Europe versus the United States. The grip levels are different. The type of tracks are different. Their rules and regulations are a lot more stringent in Europe than they are in the United States. So all these things have a bearing on the competitiveness of your package. And a general rule of thumb is if your package is competitive in Europe, then it's going to be definitely competitive in the United States. But that's up to a certain point. Once you get to the front end of the pack at national level, then you have to be mindful of our conditions here and how your package, your chassis, the geometry of it, the components of it are going to react to track conditions as the racing weekend progresses. So those are the changes that we have been able to make for the American product that have made our chassis supremely competitive on the U.S. market, to the point that a lot of the development that we did for the U.S. market are now being used with our factory team in Europe. So we are very, very proud of that kind of a development that we did with our Italian factory. And it's something that all of our American chassis benefit from.
Yeah, and you have had some really good success at the national level. I know where you're based out of Florida. You always have guys filling up the podiums out in Florida. Would you say maybe one of your biggest obstacles at this point is getting the brand awareness just across the whole country?
Of course. I mean, TB Kart is a very young company. It's only 5 years old, 6 years old, TB Kart USA. TB itself, TB Kart SRL, or the factory in Europe, this is the second iteration of them. The factory itself has been in the family that owns it right now for about a century. So they started the factory in Europe producing parts for the military and the war effort during World War II. So that's how far back it goes. In the 80s, they shifted most of their focus to producing go-karts. At that time, the go-kart chassis, and we were talking about this offline, was called TIBI, T-I-B-I. That's the last iteration or the first iteration of the chassis coming to the United States. And now there has been an evolution over time, and the name has changed to TB Kart, as in Tango Bravo Kart. So it's been fantastic, and the people that own the factory are the same family. The grandfather started it. The father and uncle of the current owners and that are running it started running it after the grandfather. And now there are two cousins that are the kids of the father and uncle that are running the factory. Young guys, very bright, very focused, and phenomenal partners to us. They're great people to work with.
Now, you could point me in the right direction if I get too far off base, but currently TB Kart produces their own material in their own factory, correct?
Yes. That's true. Now, let's look back at a little bit of a history of TB Kart. When TB Kart came for their second iteration, for the current iteration that we're in right now, we had to make a decision. There was a finite amount of production capacity that had to be shared between our rental chassis and racing chassis. At that point, we wanted to focus a lot more on producing the most competitive rental chassis for the rental market. So the rental chassis are the ones that you go to your fun center and you pay them X amount of dollars for 10 minutes time on their track. So that's a business-to-business model. So we wanted to make sure that we had a fantastic offering to be able to compete in that space. So we dedicated our entire production capability to that. At that time, we still had racing chassis. We partnered with, we actually contracted with CRG to produce our chassis at their factory per our specs for a period of time. So they did that for us for about 2 years to allow us to catch up with our capabilities there and also expand our factory in Europe. Once the expansion was completed, we brought all of our production, both racing and rental, back in-house. So today, it's now 3-4 years that we have brought everything back in-house. We do everything ourselves. Certain things like powder coating our chassis is outsourced to a factory that's about 5 kilometers from ours. So, certain things like painting, the powder coating is outsourced, but we control all the key elements of the design. We design our own jigs, we design the geometry, we source our own tubes. That is extremely important for the performance of the chassis. Something as minute as the thickness of the tube that we use in each area of the chassis geometry has a massive bearing on the performance of the chassis at the end of the day. That is something that we control ourselves, and we experiment with it. We experiment with chemical treatments for our tubing that also has a bearing on the performance of the chassis and its flexibility and so on and so forth. So all of these things are in-house. We have the know-how, we have the equipment to be able to control things at a very core level. And that also gives us the capability to be able to react very quickly to the needs in the market. So if, let's say, there's a new engine package that comes out that has massive different requirements on the chassis in order to be able to perform at its optimum, we can do that very quickly. We can make the changes. We can change our jig. We can change our tube sourcing and so on and so forth to be very reactive and even proactive to be able to get to the market in a way that makes us competitive and makes us be able to beat the other guys to the front of the pack.
Well, and I'm glad you brought up engines, because I was going to segue perfectly into my next question for you. I know for a fact you offer a kid kart. I know for a fact you offer a 4-stroke chassis. So that's the Briggs & Stratton 206 or World Formula setup. And I know for a fact that you have 125 shifter chassis. So if someone's looking to do this trade-in, it almost doesn't matter what current engine package they're running, because you guys cover the whole gamut. I mean, you have, I just named 3 of them. So what's left? KT100, IAME, KA100, the tag stuff. You cover all of them.
We cover all of them, and we also for the transitional areas, and I'll explain that a little bit in just 1 minute. The transitional areas, we also provide an appropriate option to the driver themselves. What is the transitional area? Let's say we have a proven chassis for LO206 package, the Briggs & Stratton package. That chassis can also do very, very well with the KA100 or the 100cc chassis. Again, it does the power band of that motor melds well with the chassis capability. You will be very, very competitive on track. Now, in the case of the 100cc, you have 2 options. You can go towards the LO206 range, which is towards the lower range of the power band, for simplicity's sake, or you can put that on the tag chassis that we have and be at the bottom of the tag chassis power band. The tag chassis can also go up to the 125cc. Now, it's up to the driver themselves. If they feel like, hey, most of my driving is done with either the 206, or maybe if I'm feeling my oats, I'm going to put 100cc on my kart and go out and have a good time, then that's the route you're going to go. Now, if you want to go towards, hey, 100cc is really cool for, me having just a good day, and I also want to compete in the 125 tag series, then you go to the tag chassis that we have, the S586. So those are kind of like the transitional area that you can go either way with that particular motor package. But what we designed, or let's say our 206 package for, is we first of all got an American Briggs & Stratton motor, send it to Europe so they could do testing there and put it on track and try all the stuff that we were recommending to them at the factory before sending us and finalizing the jig. So they were doing that over there. We were doing the same thing here, and pooling all of the data that we have gotten with the help of our factory driver here, and also our factory drivers in Europe, to gather a lot of good data, usable data that we can act on. A lot of times when you and I go to the track, we come in, and if we're lucky enough to have a tuner, the tuner comes up to us and is like, hey, how was the kart? My response, and I've only been racing for, let's say, 7 years. My response to them for probably 6 of those 7 years was, oh, the kart was good. that's it. No matter how much the guys sweated to make a million changes to my kart, I would go out, I would come back and say, oh, the kart was good. So, the feedback that you get from your drivers really has a direct bearing on your ability to be able to tune the kart, to be able to design the kart if you're in the design phase, and so on and so forth. So we used our factory drivers that are very experienced. They are very good at giving the right feedback to you, to our people here, our engineers, to be able to take action to make some changes that would make sense for the track and that would gain us time on the track. So we did that here, we did that in Europe, and we now have a 206 package that is different than the majority of them that have been on the track. Most of the ones that have traditionally been on track, for example, use a 40 millimeter axle. We wanted to stay standard with our 50 millimeter axle to reduce the cost for people if they decide to have, let's say, a 206 chassis and a tag chassis. So we didn't want them to have to store 40 millimeter axles and 50 millimeter axles when they go between tag and 206. At the same time, it benefited us as a company to be able to streamline our inventory system here, so we wouldn't have to stock two different thickness chassis. That has financial benefits for us because we don't have to maintain those two stock levels and sit on exact inventory essentially. And it also, that way it frees up funds for us to be able to continue developing, to field a racing team, and so on and so forth. So it benefited everybody. And we have a package that really works and works well with standardized equipment.
Perfect.
So that's just the case for 206 as an example. We have done that for every category of chassis that we have here.
Yeah, and that's what as a factory, that's what you have to do. And it's again, you've already stated that at one point it was built by CRG, and that stigma, it's carried over, and people's it's just someone else built it. So thank you for clarifying that everything's in-house now. And then also that you're doing the testing and you're trying to do the two different markets. I know here in Northern California, our closest track that would resemble a CIK style facility is Sonoma. And so Sonoma, it's big, it's smooth. The turns are very drivable. The curbing is very usable. That it's going to be more of that CIK style current kart track. But then you travel 30 miles inland and you hit all of our valley tracks, and I call them IKF tracks because back when IKF had their heyday, back in the 80s and 90s, you had the MX, the Invaders of the worlds. You had a harder tire. The karts were lighter. The karts were smaller. They were narrower. And being that you guys are developing chassis on multiple different tracks, multiple tires, multiple continents, then you can kind of gather that knowledge and go, okay, well, this setup worked really well for this track, but not so well here. And you can incorporate that. So that's great to hear.
Sure. And we're trying to come up with ways to make that information more usable in a universal way. Instead of saying X track, we are talking about conditions that we experienced at that particular track. So let's say the grip level was X, the weather is Y, then, and the temperature, fluctuates X amount during the course of the day, then these are potentially the changes that would make the most sense for you from our baseline. So baseline is established as this thing that comes out of the box. Then from there, you make changes to the kart to react to the conditions that you're experiencing when you're having your race weekend or your practice day or what have you, when you're on track. So we want to make it global instead of specific to a particular track.
And I personally, for those that don't know, I personally run the TB kart stuff, and I probably wore out my tech help from Farshad and Chad over the years with the four-stroke stuff. I'm not a four-stroke guy, and I really struggled at the beginning with just the lack of power in the four-stroke package and getting the kart to work with no power. When you're a shifter guy and you're used to diving to the corner and powering out, the Briggs doesn't like that. And over the years, I tried different seats, I tried different axles, and I overthought everything because that's what I do. And the last few times I went to the track, all I messed with, I went back to your baseline. I went back to the standard axle, standard seat, baselined it, and then I started working with Ackerman. I didn't have to buy any special spindles. I didn't have to buy any special steering shafts. But I started messing with the Ackerman of the Kart. And at one of our local tight tracks, that was the biggest gain I had out of everything. Again, out of different rims, different axles, different seats. Yeah. It's just messing with the Ackerman. And that was sitting there the whole time. It was available on the cart out of the box the whole time. And I just kind of ignored it. And I really found that it kind of be an eye-opener. It's like, okay, Jason, stop thinking. And again, it goes to the different tracks. That was a very tight track that required the cart to be able to turn from left to right very quickly. But I would not run that setup at Sonoma.
Right. And that makes perfect sense. And that's a lot of the testing that we did, as I was explaining before, was done at different tracks to get feedback that would be appropriate for those different types of conditions. The track is too short, the track is tight, the track is very technical, or the track is wide open and fast turns everywhere. So, in Florida, we have several tracks. One that most people are familiar with is Ocala. Ocala hosts multiple national and regional level races all the time. So a lot of people throughout the states are familiar with it because chances are they've traveled there to race it. It is a simple track, short track, and it's tricky track. So once you learn the tricks, you're competitive. Then it becomes how well you execute that over and over and over again in a consistent manner to be able to get to the front of the pack. So chances are at a national level race, the time difference between your pole position and your 20th place is well within half a second, well within. So that's the type of track it is. So a simple mistake will annihilate your weekend.
Yes.
And what we want to do is to give the racing package, give the chassis to the driver that will best set them up to be able to develop a comfort level that they can execute consistently over and over and over again during the course of that race.
Absolutely, and that makes sense. And, for the newer karters that are out there listening, a lot of karts nowadays compared to the old karts, there's a lot of tuning available. And it just helped just go out and start messing with stuff. Like I just mentioned, here I was changing seats. I was burning down for Chad's phone on tech stuff. I was calling Chad. I was changing axles. I was cutting axles. I was doing all this stuff. And one day I was looking at the cart and I thought to myself, I never mess with the Ackerman. And that was all I did when I went to the track that day. I just messed with Ackerman. I brought my sniper out. And then brought the snipers out, started messing with the front end. I didn't like it. I went the other direction. It's like, oh, I like this. And I just kept fine-tuning it that way.
I would say when you're also tuning, be dramatic, especially when you're at when you first get the cart itself, to get the chassis. Be dramatic. Let's say if you're out on a medium axle, next session, go out on the hardest axle that you can. The following session after that, go on the softest axle that you possibly can during a practice day.
Yes.
Just to see what the cart will do. I mean, that will help you establish a mental baseline for yourself. Hey, I did this. That was the only change I made. And here is what the cart did. It either really, really sucked when I went totally soft, or it was really, really amazing when I went totally hard. Now, amazing usually to people that are not at the on podium contenders for national level races means I was very comfortable. You and I both know that if you're comfortable in a car, you're not necessarily going setting any speed records.
Yeah, or you're overstuck.
Yeah, overstuck or something.
But, yeah, because you're never catching the back. It just
exactly.
It's
So
perfect.
being too comfortable is not necessarily good, but it also helps you, again, establish that mental baseline for yourself. So you know that, hey, this is the range over on one extreme, this is the range on the other extreme, and where do I want to be competitive in time, and also have a balance with my comfort level.
Yeah, and like you said too, I mean, and it doesn't matter if it's right or wrong on a test day, because that's going to
No,
be data you're going to store in your head and go, oh wait, that was completely wrong for that day, but this is what it felt like.
right.
And you go to a different track or you have a different condition, and you say, oh wait, maybe that direction will work this time.
Yeah.
Um, but I kind of found once you find the that baseline, that sweet spot, you're not doing a lot of changes anyhow. You're
No,
just
it's
fine tuning
marginal.
from there.
It's marginal. Yeah. Those
Yeah.
changes are marginal. Once you get to where your cart needs to be and where it likes it, and you're comfortable with it as a driver, then you're making adjustments, minor adjustments to compensate for what's happening on the track.
Yep. And if you're making all kinds of changes to the cart and it just doesn't react, or your lap times don't get better, double check your chassis. Make sure it's not fatigued. There's cracks. Something's broke. Something mechanically is not wrong. And if everything looks perfectly sound, then it's time to look at the wheel nut. And sometimes drivers just get stuck in a rut where they do the same thing over and over and over again. And you may drive the same bad line 100,000 times. So sometimes you got to move your line a little, change your input to the cart, and see if
Sure,
the chassis responds positively or negatively to that.
sure. And that's where data comes in. And, most of us have telemetry devices on our carts, like a Micron 5, or that's the current iteration of the Micron telemetry device that collects massive amounts of data when you're out on track. And to be, very honest, 90% of the people don't use much of it other than here's my temperature for water, maybe exhaust gas, and here is the RPM. That's about it.
If you hit max recall and that's your data, then you're not using data.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, so many people just hit max recall and it's like, oh, that's my RPM. It's like, probably not, especially in a shifter, especially
Yeah.
in the shifter stuff. Um,
Low speed, once you look at the data itself, you can pick out the RPM differences. A lot of times when you're looking at the RPM at different parts of the track, that will help you get you closer to the gear ratio that you need to be on to maximize the potential of the cart on that particular track. So there's a lot to be gained from data at all levels of racing, not just shifters. It starts with kit carts and LO206s, goes all the way to shifters. With kit carts, it's very difficult to get feedback from the younger drivers. That's just normal. I mean, they're kids. They're out there to have a good time. But by the time you graduate to, let's say, tag junior, you should be able to give some feedback.
Absolutely. Yeah, actually, your comments just kind of took me back to the 90s when my very first go-kart, it had a Digitron. And it had the Digitron tack, and I can't remember
Sounds
what
like a
model it
transformer.
was. Yeah, exactly. So it had the Digitron tack, and there was a little button on the side. And the button was for memory. And when you hit the button, it just did basically a screenshot of the data at that moment when you hit the button. And at one particular track, we were always looking for our clutch stall speed. And to this day, I have a beautiful Micron 5 on my cart. It has GPS, etc. And I find myself reading the tack while I'm on the track, definitely in the corners where the engine bogs down. I just give it a quick glance and I watch it. Say, okay, what's my bottom RPM? And then I have two spots on the back straight and the front straight. It's always the same two spots. And I look to see if my RPMs are higher or lower. And I know that if my high RPMs are lower, I'm going slower. And if they're higher, I'm going faster. Because I'm always using the same spots on the track. And I think that goes back to that damn Digitron of having to press the button to get that screenshot.
That's too funny.
Well, let's wrap this up, but let's throw out a little bit of I don't know, word of advice, or I don't know what you can call it. I mean, as an importer, there is no way you have not received the cut and paste. You know, I'm the best driver in the world, or my kid's the best driver in the world.
Yep.
And for those that are listening, if you're doing that kind of stuff, don't stop. Don't stop doing it, because you never know when you're going to run across that person that is in a position that can help you. But as a guy reading those emails or getting those Facebook messages, what's a piece of advice you can give to someone that's listening to help them craft a better proposal to you? Or as an importer, what are you looking for before you even decide you're going to help someone? It's like, how can they benefit your business?
Sure. The best thing that I could say overall is that you have to look at the entity that you're approaching as a business. So TB Kart USA is a business. What is inherent for every business, what every business benefits from, is a budget. In that budget, there is a certain amount set aside for your marketing effort. What they are applying for as a factory driver is really categorized under marketing for a company like mine. TB Kart USA or our competitors have the same kind of a structure, I'm sure. So you are essentially proposing to a company like mine, now let's just say to TB Kart USA, that TB Kart would be well served by spending its marketing dollars on you, in supporting you to get on track, to provide us with the results that we need, that we can parlay into additional kart sales over time. So if you feel confident that you can produce those results, by all means, then approach the entity that you want. But as a business, we reserve the right to invest our marketing funds where we are going to see the best return for our investment. My personal rule of thumb is rule of three. If I am going to spend $1 in marketing, I expect to get $3 in return. It's very simple, and it served me well in the past, and I foresee it doing so in the future as well. So if, let's say, we have $1 that is set aside for a marketing effort, and I have to decide as the manager of the business where I'm going to spend that money, I'm going to spend it where it's going to produce $3 for me. So the old adage in racing is you win on Sunday to sell on Monday, so on and so forth. To a lot of extent, that's true. But there is a lot more to it. The buyer of today is a lot more sophisticated than they used to be a decade ago or 2 decades ago, just because of the availability of information to them. So you can go online and do a massive search on everything karting in a day. In the 80s, that was impossible. So you relied on a lot of word of mouth, people's recommendations to you, and so on and so forth. Today, the world is a lot different and a bit more sophisticated in its information gathering capabilities. So that I don't want to say reduces, but that does not put a huge amount of emphasis on the value of a quote unquote factory driver to come on board and help you sell on Monday. So there are a lot more that's going to help you be marketable to an individual that's evaluating you as a potential supplier for their karting. So questions would be, how long is this going to last? Is this, am I going to have longevity issues? Is this a 2-race kart that I'm going to have to throw away mid-season and get a new one? Is the kart competitive out of the box? How hard is it to make changes to be competitive at the front of the grid, and so on and so forth? All these questions that people can ask now and get answers within minutes, really. Like going online and doing a thorough search, they can get answers to all these things. So that diminishes the value, the traditional value that a factory driver or a person that is applying for these positions would bring in. But that does not eliminate the value these people have. So if a driver feels that they are a good solution for TB Kart, by all means, I would encourage them to approach us. Things that they will need is a business case for how they are going to be able to bring a return on TB Kart's investment back to TB Kart.
Still there?
Yep.
Yep. Sorry about that. My camera started flashing at me. And I'm going to piggyback off of that a little bit. Like you said, there's a lot of data available. We have the internet. You have your cell phone. You can find a lot of information. When I worked in an engine shop, the fastest emails that I always responded to every email, and I would try to, even if we weren't going to sponsor a driver or offer any product, I always try to send something back that was constructive so they could build their package. But do your research on the company. So if you're, don't just do copy and paste and change the to Jason, to Farshad, to Bob, to John. And I don't know how many sponsorship letters I read through where they were either from clubs or drivers that were four-stroke racers. Well, the shop that I worked in, we had nothing on our webpage, nothing on Facebook, nothing about four-stroke. We were strictly, and it was very clear in the About Us page, we were only a two-stroke engine shop. So
Right.
if you're going after a company and you're asking them for their money, and it doesn't mean it doesn't have to be a check, but if you're asking for a chassis or if you're asking for a product, you're asking for their money. Spend the time to research that company and make it a personal proposal to that company.
Exactly. And that's exactly what I meant by if you think that you can bring value to TB Kart that is going to meet my criteria, which is $1 to $3, then by all means, let's have that conversation. I'm more than happy to talk to you about it. But if you are looking for me to invest essentially in you, and good things may happen, that's something that we first of all we don't have to do, and I would not be interested in.
Yeah, and another thing from my experience within the industry, the drivers that we've been the most willing to support financially, as a business, you're always trying to support everybody, but to actually give product away, those are the ones that actually sold product for us first. They developed a relationship with us, and then they turned around and said, look, I'm sending you these people. I've sent you these people in the past. And then you look at it, and it's like, oh, yeah, you're right. Thank you for the reminder. Yeah, we could help you out here. We could do this. We can do that.
Sure.
So instead of doing the cold calls, go to the people you're already working with and say, hey, I sent my buddy Bob over to you, and he bought a chassis, and I sent this guy. Is there some sort of support I can get from you? And you might be very surprised how your action can give you a very good and positive reaction from your potential sponsor.
Of course, and we're all looking for a good ambassador for our brand. I mean, it's if you get into our cart and you're a supported driver and you go and say unfavorable things about the cart, whether it's warranted or not, in public, then that's not acceptable by me. I cannot speak for anybody else. I don't accept that. If you have an issue with the cart, then I need to know about it, but not in a public setting. Not that these things don't happen. They do. We are not a perfect company. Every now and then we come up with things that need to be improved, for sure, to be generous. But those opportunities for improvement are far and fewer in between now than they used to be in the past. Regardless, you need to conduct yourself as a professional, and as a professional, you praise in public and you reprimand in private. So if you have a gripe, that goes in private. If you have something good to say, You can say that anywhere you want. And that's not just a TB Kart rule, TB Kart USA rule. That's a general golden rule that applies to every company. If you watch Formula One, you never ever see these drivers say anything bad about their organization, whether it's Ferrari, Mercedes, or I don't know, the back of the pack, Williams. So they all say good things about their respective organizations. Once they go inside behind closed doors, they say, "Hey, your car sucked." I mean, I and that's fine. I mean, when you're there, that's why you're there. You want the feedback from your drivers, from everybody, to be able to make your product better, and that's the way I look at it. Now, you take those criticism to heart and find a solution. A lot of times, if you don't come up with a proposal for a solution, then you can also be labeled as a whiner. I mean, there are. It's how the world works.
Yeah.
If I come to you and say, Jason, let's say in your past life, the motor you gave me, man, was absolute garbage. I mean, it's the only reason that I didn't get to be in the front of the pack and on the podium and so on and so forth. And you look at me like I have two heads, and you would say, Farshad, you've been driving for 3 years, dude. You're racing with people that were pretty much out of the crib. They were put in a go-kart, and they know how to make this thing sing and dance much better than you would ever think about. And you're telling me that the motor is bad? How about you go and look at your driving before you come and complain to me? And all these things apply across the board. It's just human nature. It's the way all organizations are run. We have ended our relationship with a particular driver that did exceptionally well, but he was very emotional, let's just say, in the wrong moments. And that's not a good reflection on a professional organization like TB Kart. So we ended our relationship. And right now, the first thing that I look for is a good ambassador for my brand. Is this person somebody that can help me make this kart the best that it can be for everyone, for all the average drivers that are out there? And also, is this person going to be able to present our karts in the appropriate light, best light, to all the prospects that are out there? We want people to know TB Kart, its potential, what it can do for them to bring joy to them. I mean, that's essentially the business that we're in. We're in here, in this business, to help people have fun. That's the short version of what we do. So I want a good ambassador for the brand that's going to help us do that, and do that at multiple levels. First, they feel good about the kart that they're in or they're considering. And second, actually in reverse. First would be make our kart the best that it can possibly be. That's job number one. That's what we promise to all of our drivers. That's what my goal is. I want to be the best. I want to have the best kart on the grid that can compete at any day, any track with anyone. So if we have that, then we also need to be presenting our products in the best light possible. Every product that's out there will have weaknesses, will have massive strengths that you have to deal with. So the way that we do that in a professional manner reflects directly on our ability and our organization as a whole.
Completely agree. So with that being said, let's wrap this thing up. How does someone get a hold of you for the trade-in program?
The trading program, you have a multitude of options. You can go online and get in touch with me on phone, email, through Facebook, Instagram. The sky's the limit. We're everywhere.
And it's tbkartusa.com.
Correct.
Not carts.
Not plural, singular.
Not plural. tbkartusa.com. And I usually see most of your posts on Facebook.
Yep.
I'm sure you have an Instagram page.
Yep.
You're very accessible, so that's a nice thing.
Yeah,
people are reaching out. And then, do you have any dealers or anyone else that you want to give a shout out to that may be able to help transition with the trade-in?
Sure, we have dealers throughout in strategic locations. So the best way to get to the dealers that are nearest your location is to give us a call, and we'll put you in touch with them. We're here to make your life as easy as possible and make the whole process very seamless for you. That's why there are not a lot of rules with our special that's going on, and that is pretty much standard operating procedure for us. The more rules we have, the less attractive things are. And that's, that it comes from me personally not liking jumping through a million hoops for, whatever discount that you're willing to give. If you feel strongly about your product, then you don't have to make people jump through a lot of hoops. And that's what we are.
That's very true. All right. Well, I'm going to ask you to stay on the line for a moment, but I'm going to cut the podcast off. But if you can stay on the line so we could wrap it up off the air.
If I may just add one thing, thank you very much for the opportunity to speak to your audience. I really appreciate it. I certainly hope that everyone listening will consider TB Kart in the future. And at the least, if you see us at the track, come and say hi.
That's perfect. And thank you again Shad for coming on. And
my pleasure.
For those of you that are listening, many of you know the website, norcalcarters.com. If you go to NorCal Carters on Facebook, I have already added TB Kart USA, their link to the podcast here. So you can check that out for the direct contact information to them. And thank you, everyone, for listening. And thank you Shad for taking the time out.
My pleasure. Have a fantastic rest of the day.